great. So the title, we're trying to be a little creative here, because I was talking to Kiki and I said, Kiki, is there anything you recommend that I do, or any specific topics? And she was saying, yeah, we're going to be studying the Spirit's book, specifically like the sacrifices, law of adoration, and things like that. So the reflection today pertains to outer expressions of, adoration, to inner adoration, meaning to adore God and adore our Master Jesus with the moral transformation that goes inside each one of us. That's going to be the talk of today. And I wanted to bring a visual point here for us to start to see what are some of the things that we as humans have done throughout humankind. Just a couple of things here. We have been adoring God or gods at some point as well for a while, and these are all outer expressions, meaning outer adorations, things that we do on the external piece, that we build these things in order for us to express worship or and create a space and a demonstration of our love for whatever God or whatever gods, like I said in plural as well, that we believe or believed in. So these are just a few examples throughout the world to show also that there is it's not tied to a specific culture necessarily or a specific religion. All religions have their own forms of adoration and outer expressions of their adoration. But the question perhaps that lead us to the talk of today is, how have we been worshiping God? How have we done, our adoration currently? Because a lot of this was done in the past, and as we learn from Jesus, what happens to all these expressions of outer adoration, what happened to all of these things that we build externally is this. Eventually, time will corrode everything. Everything that is material will one day be like that. It's going to become, as Emmanuel, the author Emmanuel, always says very wisely, it's going to become ruins and silent graveyards. That's what he called the cities, the empires, and all those things that are human creations, and the temples, the churches, the synagogues, everything that we can think about that is used to adore God or used to express a form of adoration will one day become that. So the question then is, how have we fared so far as humans, and what have we done so far in regards to adoration? How can we change that now? How can we interpret the law differently? How can we express our love for our Master Jesus, for our God, in a better way? That is not an outer expression, that's not an external showing, but it's more of an internal transformation that will for sure reflect externally, but it starts inside of us, starts within us. But we have to go back a little bit to realize, and this is from the Spirit's book, question 667, when they're gonna ask why is polytheism, meaning the belief in multiple divinities, although false, that's what they ask, nevertheless one of the most ancient and widespread human beliefs. And they're gonna reply by saying the conception of the unity of God could only be, in the mind of men, the result of the development of his ideas, incapable in his ignorance of conceiving of an immaterial being. Whatever he could not understand was looked upon by him as being the work of a supernatural power. If we imagine that we have, as humans, as immortal spirits, which is one of the precepts of Spiritism, one of the pillars of understanding, if we consider that we are immortal spirits, that we have been in different material, bodies previously, and in different cultures and in different lives, in different circumstances, and we are always evolving. So these three things, we're immortal, we're always evolving, and we have adopted different names, different cultures, inhabited different bodies. We will understand that where we are now is more evolved than where we were thousands and thousands of years ago. As spirits, the conception of God, the conception of divinity was still very far from our understanding, and I dare say still is, and that's okay because we'll get there one day. But it's a little more evolved than what it was before. And there's this idea that we couldn't necessarily put a finger or realize what God was. So what we started to do was we started to look at everything that we didn't create. And when I say we, I mean humans of old. We didn't create, so something must have created it. This something must be divinity. It must be the divine. So we started to idolize different things, and we started to express this adoration externally by doing sacrifices, by thinking that the fire was a god, by thinking the thunder was a god, by thinking there was a god of the ocean, by naming all different gods. So those are the ways that we could understand and sort of conceptualize that something was greater than us, which is interesting to think about, that we already had that seed within us, that there must be something greater than us. There must be something more powerful than us. So there was this idea of polytheism, meaning like the adoration of multiple gods, where we would therefore recognize within ourselves that there was something greater, but we just couldn't explain or understand very well why or what that was. So we couldn't account for that, but that was a step. That was a step in the right direction when we think about understanding God and understanding things through the law of adoration. So there comes the question of sacrifices, questions 669, where Karek's going to say, the custom of offering human sacrifices dates from the remotest antiquity. And then he says, how can mankind have been led to believe that such an enormity, meaning the sacrifice, animal, human, whatever that may be, could be pleasing to God? Kardec is asking that. In my view, it's almost like a naive question in a sense, because if he stopped to think about it, he would have the answer. But it's great that he wanted to give us an even greater answer by asking the spirits. Well, the same way that if we think about that a child will make a mistake that an adult would be like, no, there's no way that I'll do that. This is very wrong morally. But a child will do that. Why? Because the child doesn't have the evolved intelligence to know better. So same thing before. And they're going to say, in the first place, through their not having comprehended God as being the source of all goodness. Among primitive peoples, matter predominates over spirit. Their moral qualities are not being yet developed. They give themselves up to the instincts of brutality. Yes, exactly. They didn't comprehend God, so they thought that sacrifice of an animal, of other like humans, would be something that was pleasing to God, as if it was a way that for God to see how much we loved Him, how much we worshipped Him, how much we feared Him, how much we wanted from Him, because a lot of that was to gain favor as well. Let me gain a favor of God and do the sacrifice, as if it was a bargaining or bartering, And he says, among primitive peoples, matter predominates over spirit. Yes, and this is something that with the advent of Spiritism, we have also learned how matter predominates over spirit, but as we start to evolve, spirit becomes more predominant over matter. So in the primitive worlds, brutality is everywhere. Matter predominates. The lower passions, acting on instincts, all those things are very strong. But as we evolve, slowly progress, both as humans, as a society, and also our planet, we start to shift that. So spirit becomes more influential over matter, and as a consequence, we start to act in better ways because we understand God in better ways. He's saying their moral qualities not yet being developed, or they thinking that they didn't know that God was the source of all goodness. Now we know. God is infinitely just, kind, fair, loving, merciful, perfect in all His qualities. If God was a little bit jealous, a little bit vengeful, a little bit envious, like all qualities that we had before when we had gods, plural, how could we say that something like that is infinitely good or perfect? It's not, because if it's 0.00001% imperfect, it is not perfect. But now we have this understanding. So now for us, when we look back, we may even judge and think, oh my God, what a terrible thing. And even though it was a terrible thing, we have to understand that was our understanding, our concept back then, because we couldn't have a better concept of God. We would think that things like this would be acceptable to God. As immortal spirits, I ask myself, how many of these have we been in? How many throughout the different reincarnations we have had? We most likely, I don't know each one of you listening to this, but I dare say that we most likely have been in a few of these wars, a few of these crusades, a few of these quests to please God by exterminating anybody else who disagreed with us, exterminating anybody else who thought of a different God, or who worshipped a different name, or who worshipped many gods. Well, only my God is the one that I'm gonna that's the true one, so I'm gonna kill you, so you know that my God is more powerful, as if it was a show of force. Again, all misunderstandings of what God truly was. And we still don't have that understanding fully, but we now understand a few more things than we did back then, thankfully. We understand more things now than we did back then, I dare say, because now we have this understanding of how these things are completely unacceptable. Why would God ask for a destruction of something that he created as well? Why would he rejoice in seeing one son killing the other son? What father, what mother would rejoice in that? Oh, because the other son disagreed with the mother, so the older son, let's call it, is going to kill the younger one? Because no, for us it's inconceivable, but it wasn't always the case. We have changed, we have evolved, we have different knowledge now. We also have the understanding, as they're going to say in the Spirit's book, that wars like that are stirred up by evil spirits. Yes, that we also have the influence of spirits in our lives, and a lot of the times these wars were a result of that, result of the influence, and every single one had an influence, but I'm saying it varies depending on the person and the place. But these evil spirits that were also very primitive is still very much brutal and wanting to rejoice in the carnage. So we go back to the Spirit's book and we start to talk about adoration. So we know that sacrifice is not the right thing, even if it's sacrificing animals to please God, or to gain a favor, or killing another human being and sacrificing another human being because they don't agree with us. So we go to question 653. Are external manifestations essential to adoration then? So we know we can't necessarily adore God in ways that will be harmful to his creations. But should we do it externally? What does it say? And they're gonna say that these acts of external worship, if they are very useful, that's what the spirits are gonna say, if they're not in a vain pretense, meaning if it's not something that is done just for show. Oh, I'm gonna donate a lot of money to charity here, but behind that is the sentiment of like, oh, people are gonna applaud me, people are gonna put my name on something, and they're gonna get all the adulation. Because what is that? That is definitely giving into pride and selfishness, and that's not the way. This external adoration shouldn't come from a place in the heart where we have pride and selfishness reigning in that act. So they're gonna say that true adoration is in the heart. When we merely worship, or when we are doing these things externally but not internally, they're not helpful and they're not the true type of adoration. But if I'm donating something to a place or to someone, and I'm doing it with my heart, and I'm doing it to help someone else, or help an institution, or help someone else, that is a way to adore God. There is a way to worship. That is also a way to respect and show our love to the Creator. the following question, he's going to ask, does God accord a preference to those who worship him according to any particular mode? In other words, is God picky? Is God going to say, yes, you guys, you spiritists are adoring me in the right way. Those other Christians, they're not. Is there, what do you think the answer is going to be? They're going to say, God prefers those who worship him from the heart. Again, similar theme, but very important. With sincerity and by doing what is good and avoiding what is evil. So everything has to do with the heart. It does not matter if my label is I'm a spiritist, or if I'm this religion, if I'm that religion, if I don't have a religion but I'm still doing good, if I'm still doing work to help someone else, to help others. The label is not important. Oh, but I don't do the prayer every single day. Is that, oh, but I pray every single day. Is there a particular way? No, everything comes from the essence. Everything comes from the true spirit behind that action. And that is something that sometimes gets lost, as it has already gotten lost throughout years and years, thousands of years of our evolution as humans. Because before we thought it's almost like a recipe to bake a cake. Oh, you must do exactly like this, otherwise the cake's not going to come out the way it should. Of course, it's an analogy for us to realize that there is no recipe necessarily. The only recipe, the only ingredient is love. And the only thing we should do is do things with love, help others with love, help yourself with love. That's it. And then the cake, your cake is going to come out perfect if you do that. Because that's the true essence. There's no specific prescription. Like I said, as we have believed for so many years, and some of us even in this lifetime, believing that there are an X amount of prayers there's going to help me repent, or X amount of, there's no such thing. 656, is worship performed in common preferable to individual worship? I thought this question was interesting. That's why I wanted to bring it here. So does God prefer when we worship him individually or in group? Is there such a difference between those two? When those who sympathize in thought and feeling are assembled together, they have more power to attract good spirits to them. It is the same when they are assembled for worshiping God. But you must not therefore conclude that private worship is less acceptable, for each man can worship God in his own thought. Each one of us has this direct access to God. We can talk to God, we can pray to God, we can listen to God, we can do good to others by ourselves. We don't need necessarily to do everything in groups, but they're saying here that when we're sympathizing and when we're worshiping in groups, because we are social beings, they're saying we have more power to attract the good spirits. Why? Because it's the same thing if we think about 20 people gather in a room, or let's say 200 people gather in a room, and they're all thinking very positive thoughts, thinking like sending love and connecting. We feel that. When we are in person, we feel that. Or even if we are not in person, but when we're all connected, we feel that. So in a way, they're saying more power, but they're also saying, but don't think that only group practices are what, are going to have power. No. Saying only group worship is acceptable, they're saying, for each man can worship God in his own thought. Each one of us has, like I said, has that access to worship God through different means. And we're going to talk about the different ways that we can worship God, and we can practice the law of adoration. But talking about adoration or worshiping, those are like synonyms. And in my Spirit's book, it says adoration, but I found newer copies that say worship. But question 649, in what does adoration consist? And they're going to say, in the elevation of thought toward God. Through adoration, the soul draws near to him. So through the adoration, the soul is going to draw near to him. And again, when we elevate our thoughts to God, when we do the initial prayer here, we are listening to those words, we're elevating our thoughts, we are getting in a good vibration, so we can connect with the higher spirit, so we can connect with the benefactors, versus if we are in a moment of anger, a moment of rage, a moment of pride, a moment of selfishness, and then our vibration lowers, and the spirits who are in that same vibration, they are gonna connect with us, and we're gonna be influenced by them. Remembering question 459 of the Spirits book, if we are influenced by the spirits, because for 457 we learned that the spirits can actually see what we think, and 459 was, okay, so can they influence what we think and what we do? And the answer is much more than you suppose, for oftentimes they are the ones who direct you. So more than we suppose. That's very interesting and brings a lot of responsibility. So when we are elevating our thought to God in adoration, when we are elevating our thought to say a small prayer, maybe, who knows, something small, when we're sending a thought to God, or when we're sending a thought of love to someone, we have this. This is the law of adoration. This is what it consists. So once again, it goes back to the essence of that action, not necessarily what we, if externally everybody's seeing me, or if everybody's seeing what I'm doing, but even in the secret of my own heart and my own mind, what am I doing? What is the essence behind that act? What is the thought that I'm elevating to God? Am I just asking? Am I just asking Him to eliminate my enemy? What sort of thought is that? What sort of essence is that thought? So this question 649 is key, because in the elevation of the thought towards God, that's when adoration consists. And as beings who have the power to think, we all have, like I said before, access to God. And of course to our Master Jesus, to the higher spirits who operate under His name, to all the benefactors that are constantly around us, helping us every single day. Every single day. We have spirits helping us, protecting us, trying to tell us things that we must do better, but only if we are keeping ourselves in that mental vibration, so we can listen more easily to them as well. They are here, they help us, but oftentimes we are the ones who put barriers for them helping us through our actions and our thoughts. So when we talk about worshiping, adoration, I brought a few images. I don't know if everybody that's here was here in the beginning, but I brought some images of temples, of churches, of mausoleums, of a lot of different things that are used to show our appreciation for the divinity. And we have to talk about, this passage in the Bible that is a great passage, where Jesus comes to Jerusalem. He enters the temple in the temple courts, actually, and he sees a bunch of people selling and buying things, and then there's that passage where a lot of people are when they're reading it, they frown a bit, because they were used to this master that was unequivocally meek and kind and calm, and then he's like they're saying he's turning tables, he's making a whole mess in a way, if we think about the situation. That's why I even tried to find pictures that depicted this moment, this passage in the Bible, and some of them, like, Jesus seemed very, very angry, and it's one of the ones that I found that was perhaps least of that. But he comes, and he see those people selling the merchandise at the temple, and he's like, no, this is what is this? And he says, is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. This is on Mark 11. So he was seeing what they were doing in the temple, and of course Jesus knew people's intentions. Jesus could see what went inside each one of us. So he was seeing the greed. He was seeing people selling things and fooling one another, and just very much, and I'm going to put this in quotation because this is a word that's been used wrongly for so many times, desecrating the temple, desecrating that place that was supposed to be a place of worship, like he says, a house of prayer for all nations. Interesting that it's interesting that he says all nations as well, because that was not really the case with that the Judaism at that point. For all nations, so saying this is not what it's supposed to be. This fair, this whole thing that's happening here, it's not meant to be. And like I said, it's a moment where some people will frown and see a Jesus that was way firmer than what we had seen before. But he was, in a way, showing us the law of adoration and saying, this is not the right sentiment that, or the right use of this place. So let's not do that. And then we also have in the same Gospel of Mark, when Jesus is saying about the prayer, the way for us to connect with God, he says, therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. That's it. So when we're worshiping God, when we're trying to connect with our Creator, with the spiritual benefactor, with our Master Jesus, when we are praying with our hearts, with the right intention, what we're doing, he's saying, we're going to receive what we ask for. But there's an asterisk to be said here. There's an asterisk in this sentence, because a lot of the time some people will be frustrated and disappointed because they say, yeah, I prayed so fervently and I didn't receive what I asked for. But then we also have to remember that we don't know what's best for us. God does. So I may pray, I may ask, but what am I praying for? Am I praying for the problem to just go away? For it to magically disappear from my life? Or am I praying for stronger shoulders? Am I praying for more resignation, more acceptance, more patience, more understanding? That's something that we must consider as well, because we're still developing our, moral aspect. We're still developing a lot of our intelligence. We're still developing our spirits as immortal spirits. So understanding adoration, worshiping, and seeing how prayer is a way for us to do that is extremely important. And Jesus even said, if you wanna talk to our Father, my Father, just go to a room, close the door, and my Father who hears in secret will hear you. Meaning, go to your room, close the door. Like he's saying, we must have that moment where, who knows, I recommend daily perhaps, but we just have that moment of calmness, that moment where we close the doors of our room, and this is obviously an analogy, and we talk to God, and we pray, and we ask, and we say how grateful we are. And we say how grateful we are for the opportunities to be here, the opportunities to have this other chance to reincarnate, this other chance to improve ourselves and to improve others. This moment of connection, which is, as we learn, adoration consists in the thought. So elevating a thought to God. Moreover, the Spirit Emmanuel, and this is a book of messages, the way, the truth, and the life, he's going to say that Christ does not draw a line between church and workplace. Interesting. The whole earth is simultaneously his prayer altar and his work arena. By praising him in the churches while denying him in the streets, we have become shipwrecked 1,000 times due to our own fault. However, any place can be consecrated to divine service. So Emmanuel is drawing our attention here to this idea that if we are going to churches, if we're going to temples, if we're going to spiritist centers, and we're praying God, we're praising, we're doing all of that, and we're learning all this information, he's going to say that these theological investigations that we sometimes get involved in, look at the word he says, theological investigations, can transform the Lord's teachings into dead relics on altars of stone. Dead relics on altars of stone. On those altars, on all those things, the outer expression, as I mentioned in the beginning, and I showed the pictures of what happened to outer expression. That's what they are. These words, if they're said without any purpose, without any sentiment, when we're, doing a talk like this one, or when we're listening to a talk, and the knowledge just stays with us, and like, oh, that was so beautiful what it was said there, or oh, I mentioned something very well, but if we don't apply that on the streets, and he's saying on the streets to show for those who need. We cannot just be preaching charity. We have to go there and do it. We cannot just be preaching patience. We have to be patient ourselves. Humility, all those virtues. We have to do that, and we have to, the praising of the God or worshiping God is not just going to be something when we go to the Spiritist Center, churches, temples, whatever we go to. And we stay there, we sing, or we do a collective prayer, and then we go home and we don't change a thing, or we don't help a brother or a sister in need. He's saying when you're doing that, when you're helping a brother or sister in need, you're going to be putting into practice what we must be doing, the law of charity. And I gave a lecture this morning here at my center in Miami, in person, and there was a story that actually connects with this lecture here, which is the passage on John 4 when Jesus is at the well, and the Samaritan woman comes and he asks her for some, like, give me something to drink, give me water, and she doesn't like that. She's like, oh, I'm Samaritan, why are you talking to me, and then he starts this conversation with her where he was telling her about the living water, about the water that will never make you thirsty. And there's a point there on verse 21 where he says, believe me, there is a time, and this is very much this talk right here. He said, believe me, there is a time, or the time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem, because they were talking about how the mountain was a sacred place. He's saying not in Jerusalem, not in the mountain. He's saying a time is coming when the true worshippers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshippers must worship in the Spirit and in truth. John chapter 4. How interesting is that? He's saying this, it's not going to be in this mountain. It's not going to be in a specific place, Jerusalem. It's not going to be in a specific temple, church, Spiritist center. We're going to worship the Father in spirit, in truth, he's saying. In here, by making the change here. And like I said, the change here will express itself externally, but the change must be done in the Spirit, must be done inside of us first before we want to express it outwardly. In the book Living Spring, Emmanuel also going to say it is indispensable to grow into the greater life. Paul, the apostle, adds that we have an altar. The ultimate purpose of temples of stone is to awaken our awareness. How beautiful is that? The ultimate purpose of these temples, these churches, Spiritist centers, these places of worship that we have used for so long and will still use. And that's okay. But the purpose of them is to awaken our awareness, is to awaken the temples that we carry inside of us. The true spirit of love that we carry inside of us, because we're all made from the love of our Creator. We all have that spark of divinity within us. Even Jesus says, you can do what I do and much more. You are gods yourselves. He was saying that we are far from being in that moment or in that state, but we have that. So the purpose of all these beautiful things that we have dedicated to our Lord, the purpose of all these things we have done is to awaken our awareness, our consciousness to what true worshiping actually means, to how we can actually adore our God. And in the same message here, that's why I wanted to put this beautiful image. He's going to say that a lot of the times, we make these things of gold, of marble, wood, clay. We adorn it with perfumes, treasures, flowers. We have raised sanctuaries, called on the help of artists to make it even more beautiful, and all those things, all these outer expressions. But they say, like he said, Emmanuel, as soon as the monument of faith is finished, we get down on our knees, in prayer, search for divine inspiration, which, as he says, it's praiseworthy, even when we forget what's outside. But he says the problem is that when we go outside and we see somebody in need, or when we go outside and we see somebody we need that's in the same roof that we are as well, then we fail to do what we praise for, what we worship for. We fail to do what we learned. So putting into action, it doesn't matter how beautiful those things are on the outside. How is the inside? How am I worshiping God on the inside as well, with my actions, my thoughts, my sentiments? And that's a question for us to have. Emmanuel also in the message number 93, same book, Living Spring, is going to say, coming to stone altars with a soul shut to the light and to the inspiration of the Master is the same as setting an impenetrable coffer of darkness out in the full light of the sun. The light waves continue to be light waves, but the darkness is not affected. The darkness inside that. First time I read this and I was doing the slide for this talk today, I actually read coughing. So I actually had an image of a coughing, which it could also be very applicable to the sentence here of the coughing that's shut and the light can come inside. But the coffer is even more interesting because the coffer, we can imagine this treasure box with, things inside. But he's saying if we go to these altars of stone, if we go to, I'm going to say again, churches, temples, synagogues, spirit centers, whatever place of adoration we use, with our soul shut to the light and to the inspiration of the Master, is the same as setting, our treasure, meaning our coffer, which is full of treasure, full of things that are precious, but it's shut, and so the light cannot penetrate. And that's the analogy he's making here. With these things that are very precious, that our soul, that is very precious, all these skills that we already accomplished, all these things that we have already done, because we're not in a primitive world, in a primitive state anymore. But if we go there shut, with our coffer shut, the lights cannot penetrate. Another thing for us to think about, how are we coming to these meetings? How are we coming to the place that we worship? How is our heart? Are we bringing our treasures inside, a coffer that is shut? And now Joanna De Angelis, and for those who have not seen my talks, I like to bring a lot of different sources to show the congruency of the message and also see things through different perspectives, even though we're going to be seeing that they basically say the same thing, which is great because it's different sources saying the same thing. She's going to say about the kingdom of heaven that the kingdom of heaven lies within you. She's going to say, Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven lies within you. Self-discovery is necessary to find this kingdom of heaven, because we're all spiritual beings and not the physical forms that we need to evolve through experiences in the flesh. So she's talking about self-discovery. She's talking about self-knowledge, and I think it ties in very well with everything that was said. And I wanted to bring this here just because in the end, each one of us is going to have a way that we worship God. Each one of us have had a very unique trajectory up to this point in regards to how we worship God in the past, in previous lives, in this life, even this lifetime. But the self-discovery piece is important because, as we see also in question 919, when they're asking about moral progress, what's the best way? And the spirits are going to say, much like the sage of the antiquity had told you already, know thyself. By knowing ourselves, we're going to know, and when we have the courage to look inward, we're going to know if we're bringing coffers, the closed coffers to the altars of stone. We're going to know if we're sometimes just preaching with our lips, but not with our actions, with the sentiment. We're going to see if we're worshiping in old ways and not in the new way. We're going to see that, and we're going to see what we still need to improve, because each one of us is a universe. Each one of us is his or her own cosmos. We're very unique, but we're all here on the same boat called Earth for a reason, and we still have to work on chipping away pride and selfishness and understanding the better ways to please our God. So for that, I want to close with 4 things that we can do, 4 ways These are such very few examples. Obviously, there's way more ways, but I wanted to bring at least four things. As you know, like some of you have heard me before, they know that I like to bring practical things that we can apply to our lives with these talks. And four ways to worship. One, elevate your thought to God each day. And these are, by the way, these are similar things that I have, and I know you mentioned this before. I have a podcast called Spiritist Companion, and one of the episodes I talk about the law of adoration and worshiping, and there are things like that there too. So that's another way that people can also access the information and sort of reflect on it. But elevating your thought to God each day, every single day, if we can elevate our thought to God in gratitude or with a prayer, just elevating our thought to our Creator, connecting to our Creator. By doing that, we will be worshiping God in the inner temple that we all have within ourselves. We're going to be worshiping God by elevating our thought and being more easy. It's going to become more easy for the higher spirits to help us in our quest, to help us in our problems, so we can listen to our intuition, which is their way of helping us, of communicating with us. So elevating our thoughts to God each day. And I put each day because I think it could be done each day. It could take a couple of seconds only. But it's the whole thing of closing, the door of your room, shutting the door, and just talking to the Father. It could be done each day. It doesn't take long, and it becomes a habit. And we must have that habit, but not an automated habit, not something you're going to do on autopilot, where we have done for so long, perhaps with prayers, or dear Father, this and we're thinking of something else while reciting the prayer. No, that's not the way. The way is just to speak from your heart, elevate your thought to God. Recognize the Creator's work in everything. That's another way to worship as well. When we're going outside, when we're even inside, when we stop and we start to realize nature, when we start to realize everything that God created, the universe, the planets, the plants, the ants, the smallest thing to the greatest things, we're going to see how beautiful the symphony actually is. And we're going to see how blessed we are to have Earth, to have our planet, to have nature, to have everything, all those people around us. When we realize that we have a beating heart right now, the incarnate ones who are hearing me, we have a beating heart, physical heart that's beating without us even thinking about it. That's the creation of God. All of those things are creation of God. We can recognize God in everything, and that is a way of us to elevate our thoughts, to also worship Him. Make your actions a form of prayer. So working honestly, serving with love, forgiving when somebody wrongs you, asking for forgiveness when you wrong someone. These are actions that will also be perpetuating the best way to worship through our actions. So we take the knowledge, we take what we are learning and we're listening here and in other places, in other times, and we actually put into practice, because words are very beautiful, they're inspiring, but the purpose is to inspire for us to change, and we change through actions. So making our actions a form of worship or a form of prayer by, like I said, serving with love, by giving somebody something that only you can give. Making those actions, making those habits daily. And number 4, practicing charity. Also has to do with actions, but charity specifically by helping those in need. And this is a very wide, very broad statement, but it is the essence that goes with it. The essence that goes with helping someone. Practicing charity. Outside of charity, there is no salvation. Like we hear in Spiritism, we must have a charitable heart, we must have a charitable action. And when we do good to someone else, Jesus didn't say that when you do good to a little one, you're also like doing good to me, or I don't remember the correct words, but the message was that whenever we are helping someone in need, whenever we're doing charity, material charity, spiritual charity, praying for someone, offering someone a hug, a hand, a kind look, a word of encouragement, giving someone food when they need, helping someone financially, whatever it may be. There's so many different ways to practice charity. But when we're doing that, we're doing something that is pleasing to God and something that is completely opposite to what we have done wrongly for so long, killing one another, disrespecting one another, defiling one another. But now we know better. So we cannot say that we're ignorant anymore. We cannot say that we don't know, because we do know. We have the knowledge, but we must change ourselves, change our inner temple, and act in accordance to that renewed inner temple. So we may walk in the light, so we may walk in our own path of our own evolution. And that is what I had for us today. So may the peace of Jesus be with us always. Thank you so much for being here, for listening to me, and I hope this was helpful in some sort of way. So thank you.